Well, as you know, the big, beautiful bill just passed, leaving many investors wondering how it impacts them. Today, we're bringing on a CPA to explain the benefits of the bill. He'll also talk about a powerful tool for real estate investors to save money. Yes, cost segregation. I'm Kathy Fedke, and welcome to the Real Wealth Show.
You're listening to The Real Wealth Show with Kathy Fedke, the real estate investor's resource.
My guest, Sean Graham, is both a CPA and real estate investor. Today, he'll talk about how the big, beautiful bill impacts real estate investors and what cost segregation is. Sean, welcome to the Real Wealth Show.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about today, but before we get into the big, beautiful bill and how that's going to affect real estate investors and people in general, I'd like you to start with who you are and what your background is in real estate and accounting.
Yeah, for sure. So I have been a CPA since 2014. So I started off in public accounting. I did a little bit, within the world of finance in accounting. I was in private equity for a little bit, but I was always an entrepreneur. I always wanted to go out on my own, do my own thing. And so while I was working those W-2 jobs, I was also house hacking, building up my real estate, building up my, rental properties. And eventually I got to the point where I could jump into real estate full time. So I went into real estate full time with a focus on self-storage specifically. So I have a small self-storage portfolio, which I own and manage and maintain. Somewhere along the lines, I realized that I could really bridge my background in public accounting and tax with the world of real estate through cost segregation. So I've been on both ends of it. I've been on the tax side. I've been a user of depreciation and cost segregation. And I opened up my own firm, which is Maven Cost Segregation. And that's really my main focus.
Love me my cost seg. So let's talk about why it's just gotten better.
Well, as of July 4th of July, 3 days ago from filming the show. So I don't think we could have timed that any better, Kathy. But
that worked out well.
Yeah, the big, beautiful bill, it passed, it got through the Senate, got through House, and it was signed by Trump. That's a really, really big deal for the real estate community. I think everyone who is in real estate. And so what that essentially does is it brings back 100% bonus depreciation. And that means that really real estate investors have a large tax incentive and are able to write off a big front load their depreciation expenses, get a big tax write-off upfront, and tax benefits. Probably one of the most attractive things about being a real estate investor. I'm just very, very excited to have it back, and I'm sure you are as well.
Yeah, so I agree. The tax savings you get through real estate is unparalleled. I don't know any other business where you get that, except maybe oil and gas, but then you don't get a lot of things in oil and gas that you get from real estate. I could go into that, but another topic. So there is so much incentive by the government to invest in real estate. And that's why we get these tax breaks. And love or hate this bill, this is really good for real estate investors. And if you're not a real estate investor or you don't like the bill, you should probably consider being one because it's here to stay. So let's just kind of go. And am I right about that? I think I read somewhere that this is permanent.
Yeah, so there's no phase out on it. So
Okay.
in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in 2017, when they put in 100% bonus depreciation, it was good for 5 years, and then it started phasing out 20%, every single year after that. This doesn't have a phase out period. So it kind of it's just 100% bonus, and that's good through 2029. And then we kind of will be in a similar situation where they're going to extend it or not. So yeah.
Okay. So it's not forever. So you've got till 2029 to get some real estate.
Yes. You got
Okay.
till 2029 to get some real estate.
Okay. All right. So if you would just explain what a cost segregation, what it is and how it differs from all the other amazing benefits people get from real estate investing. Tax.
Absolutely. So let's take a step back and just say, okay, so when you have real estate, the IRS likes real estate. They want you to invest in real estate, right? For many different reasons, to provide housing, just to invest in the economy, for small businesses, all of it. And when you do that, the IRS requires that you depreciate that real estate. So if it's a residential property, meaning somebody lives there, like you depreciate it over 27 and a half years. If it's a commercial property like office, self-storage, industrial, whatever it is, then you depreciate it over 39 years. So that means that you take the same amount every single year for 27 and a half years or 39 years. Cost segregation is a little bit different. It changes up that depreciation schedule. And what it does is it's a engineering study where we come in and we take a look at the specific building and we break that building down into components. And we say to the IRS, like, hey, not everything takes nearly 30 or 40 years to depreciate. In fact, some of this will take 15 years, some of it will take 7 years, some of it will take 5 years. And a big portion of this, which is where the 100% bonus depreciation comes in, we can just accelerate and take in year one. So a cost segregation study is the practice of front loading the depreciation expenses as opposed to waiting 30 or 40 years to take them.
So the person who this is not good for is the person who maybe doesn't make any money, right? Because you don't need the write-off if you're not making enough money. So who is this best for? Taking all of your bonuses in 1 year?
For sure. That's a great question, right? Because it doesn't benefit you, like you said, if you do not have income to offset, it's not going to be beneficial. It's just you're going to have all these deductions, but they're not actually going to lower your tax bill. The purpose is to lower your taxable income, right? I break it down into a few different categories, and we'll start with just somebody who's just a real estate investor, right? You work a full-time job, you're not a real estate professional, it's just a long-term rental. Maybe you own a strip mall, right? But like you still work, you still have a job, you do different things. And for that person, they have passive income, right? The profits from renting that property out. Now, you get the depreciation, and the depreciation can offset that passive income. IRS says, real estate is deemed a passive activity, so depreciation is a passive loss. It offsets passive income. A cost segregation study is beneficial in that scenario when the passive losses from straight line depreciation are not large enough to offset the passive income. Meaning like you have a property, it's profitable, and that profit exceeds the amount of depreciation you'd get from depreciation. In that case, it's good to get a cost segregation study, front load those expenses is going to benefit you a lot. Now, the next bucket I like to think about is the real estate professional. So those are the people, right, who are in real estate full time. So Kathy, assuming that because you're in real estate, you qualify for real estate professional status, meaning like you're involved with your own real estate on a full-time basis, at least 750 hours, it comes out to about 15 hours a week. And more than anything else, like you're not working a full-time job and then also, dabbling in real estate, but real estate is your main source of income. That's a great position to be in because now you're a real estate professional, and the IRS says, well, this is no longer a passive activity. This is active. This is an active business for you. And so the depreciation losses become active too. Now, that can be especially beneficial if you do have ordinary income outside of real estate. So you have maybe it's, you sold a business, or maybe your spouse has W-2 income, things like that, where you can use the depreciation losses from real estate to offset that ordinary income. Super beneficial.
So doctors, lawyers, tech people, anyone who's making pretty good amount of money, paying a lot of tax, if their spouse then is the one that's actively involved and that maybe they're not working another job full time, they could actively be involved in the properties and be able to then take all that depreciation against their spouse's income.
Yes, exactly. You nailed it. So we work with so many high income earners like doctors who their spouses are, maybe they're, stay at home, or maybe they're just with the kids. Maybe they're not working full time, and it creates a big opportunity for them if they get into real estate for the spouse to actually manage and be in real estate and manage that portfolio on a full-time basis, or 750 hours a week, and more than anything else. You have to materially participate in your portfolio. It's not about you just hunting for deals for 15 hours a week, right? That doesn't cut it. It needs to be actually in regards to your own real estate. But that's a big opportunity for those high income earners and the spouses of the high income earners who can become a real estate professional. That's a really large one. We work with a lot of people in that regard. The other one I'd say is short-term rentals. So the IRS says, like real estate's passive. However, short-term rentals fall into this weird niche where if you rent them for an average of 7 days or less and you materially participate in it, then you can actually like call it an active activity, right? Like it's short-term rentals become active. It's an active business. It's not passive real estate. So let's just say you have a second property and it's not, your vacation days are limited, right? So you can't just be like a second home for you where you go on vacation, but it's truly a short-term rental that you rent out. People just stay for average of a weekend, let's just say. That can be a great scenario as well, where this is now active. These are active losses, and you can use the losses from the short-term rental to offset your active income. So let's just say in this scenario, both spouses are doctors, and they're both working full-time. Well, they can build up a short-term rental portfolio and use those losses to offset that active income. So
yeah,
that's a really good one. And then it's the business owners, right? Like people kind of forget that business owners, the real estate that they're operating in, that is really important. Let's just say you're a doctor and you own a small business. Well, if you own the real estate, you get to depreciate that as well. So you can get a cost segregation study done, use that depreciation to offset the income from the business.
Fascinating. So one thing that I think people don't realize is if you're taking all of the tax cut in year one,
Yep.
then you don't really get them in the following years, right? Or what kind of deductions do you get in the following years?
It's a good question. So let's just say 100% bonus depreciation, right? Like that applies to anything that's less than 20 years, has a less than 20-year life. Mm-hmm. So you expense that all out in year one. Now, whatever you don't use rolls forward to the following year. So if you have $500,000 of depreciation this year, but you only use 100, well, the remaining 400 is going to roll over to the following year, so you can use it the following year. That's important because in the year you take it is when it's deemed as either a passive loss or an active loss. So if it's an active loss, you keep having active losses roll forward, right? Now, on the straight line part, meaning the real property, right? Because you can't just accelerate everything there is in real estate. So when I say the real property, that kind of means it's really the bones, right? It's the structure, it's the roof, it's the walls, it's the foundation, all of that. That is depreciated over the 27 and a half years or the 39 years. And so you're always going to get the straight line depreciation until you exhaust that full depreciation schedule.
Okay. And then if you sell the property, then there's recapture. How does that work?
Yes. So the IRS, there's no free lunch here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no free lunch. The IRS, this is really a tax deferral strategy. That's what this is. So this is not a permanent write-off. Now, there's ways to keep kicking the can down the road. There's ways to make it permanent. But really, if you sell the real estate, then you owe depreciation recapture, meaning the IRS says, well, sure, you took this $500,000 loss in year one, and then you sold the property, right? And so it's like, now you owe us for that $500,000. So this is important because you don't want to take all of these depreciation losses and just have them where you can't use them, right? There's no point in just like having hundreds of thousands of dollars of depreciation losses just for the sake of having them. And then you go sell the property and the IRS is like, well, this is part of your gain now, right? Like you owe us tax on that. Like now, if you're able to use them, great. Or if you keep rolling them forward and you're going to use them every single year, that's fantastic. But the IRS says, yeah, you have to, you owe us that money for the depreciation recapture. There's a couple cool things. Like one, depreciation recapture is it's taxed, at least like the real property part, it's taxed at a recapture rate maximum of 25%. So if you're at 37% tax rate, you have recapture that you're paying at 25%, well, you just save 12% on, 12% margin, right, on that. So that's really big. But I think some of the ways the IRS encourages you to keep investing in real estate is through the means of 1031 exchange. Also, that's still intact, part of the big, beautiful bill, but that means that you identify another piece of real estate and you reinvest in that real estate. And the IRS looks at it as like, hey, well, you didn't take, sure, you had a gain, but like you didn't earn that gain. Meaning like you really just took the money and you invested it in another property. You didn't recognize that gain. Third party intermediary took the money. You identified the property. I think it's within 45 days. You closed on it within, I think it's 160 or 180 days, about 6 months. And you just invested in another property. So that's a 1031 exchange. So that's a great way to keep kicking the can down the road. Have you done one of those before?
Yeah, that's actually how I got started, was with a 1031. And we've helped, oh my goodness, thousands of investors with the 1031, because it could be a little scary, a little daunting. You got to identify your replacement property within 45 days of the sale. And so we have teams across the country with properties ready to go to make that process really easy. But yeah, we're big fans of the 1031. So really there's never a good reason to sell a property. But I suppose, and you tell me, if you did sell a property and you had to pay all this tax on it because you decided not to 1031, could you then, and I don't know why you would do this, but would you then maybe get a short-term rental and then you'd start all over getting a massive deduction? So you might have the sell the property and make a bunch of profit, but you could buy another property and do another cost seg.
Exactly. You nailed it. Like people really, they hone in on the 1031, and that's because you're really not recognizing that gain, right? Like you are just continuing to kick the can down the road. You don't have a gain. But like you said, if you keep reinvesting in real estate or you buy more real estate, you can use the depreciation from another property to offset the capital gains in the depreciation recapture from the other. So you sell property A and you have capital gains from, the increase in value as well as the depreciation recapture. Well, you can use property B, get a cost seg study done on it, get the depreciation from it, and offset all those gains. And so they can wash each other out. That is a really great strategy if you are not able to, stay within the 1031 guidelines, identify the property and pick it out. Like, I don't, it's right. When it comes to depreciation, all this stuff, like I say, real estate is really the foundation, right? You're investing in real estate, in cash flow, in appreciation. That's what you want. That's why you're in real estate. So don't let the tail wag the dog, but these things are all benefits to real estate. So there are ways to offset it even if you can't fit into 1031 exchange.
Yeah, so that's just good to know, because sometimes people really do stress out they can't find their replacement property, and then they just buy a dog. They buy something they really shouldn't have bought,
right,
just to get that, just to make the 1031 work. But it is good to know, you know what, if it didn't work, just sell the property. Or if it's your primary and you can't 1031 it, but you made a ton of money on it, maybe you could sell that, but then buy another property that would give you just enormous cost seg benefits.
Right. I agree. Yeah. I agree. If you pass and then your kids inherit it or your heirs inherit the property, they get a reset in basis. So it's not like they owe all this recapture. They get a clean slate. And so that's the beauty of investing in real estate and holding on to real estate.
Yeah, I cannot emphasize that enough, that never, you don't want to just give your kids your property. It's like, hey, I've got this house. I want you to get started. We're just going to give it to you. That they're going to then inherit all the taxes on that. It's better to die first and have them inherit it.
Right.
Right. I've seen that happen too many times. Of people saying, oh yeah, my parents are able to buying this property from them, or I'm getting it, I'm taking over the mortgage, but you're also taking over everything else.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. But not suggesting that you die soon, just when you die.
Well, we all will. So, it's going to happen. But yeah, who knows what happens with tax code and stuff as the years come. But as of right now, that's the way it's set up. And it's a good thing. It's a great way to be able to transfer wealth.
So you mentioned short-term rentals. What other properties are good for this kind of tax benefits or cost seg?
Yeah, short-term rentals are great. Overall, if you take a step back and I look at all the different types of asset classes and what you can invest in, people say, well, like, what's the most beneficial for cost seg? And I think it comes down to, I wouldn't focus on an asset class, right? Again, don't let the tail wag the dog, but understand that the more complex a property is, the more we are going to be able to pick out different things to accelerate the depreciation on. And so what I mean by that is, again, the structural part of the building, like there's no bonus depreciation on the structural part of the building. But the 15-year life class, that's everything that's site improvements, land improvements. So the more elaborate of work there is on the outside, or landscaping, or we have the driveway, the more pavement there is, or asphalt, fencing, lighting, all of those things, that's 15-year life that we can accelerate the depreciation on. So that's super beneficial. Interior wise, it's like, look, if you just have a warehouse and it's just an empty shell, well, there's not going to be much to depreciate in there, right?
Mhm.
Whereas in contrast, let's say a self-storage facility, well, all of the units inside, if they're indoor climate controlled units, like those are going to be great because they're not structural components of the property, right? So you have all these partition walls, you can start taking out and the interior roll up doors and the lighting, like there's tons. When it comes to residential, you think about like the laminate flooring or the ceiling fans or specialty lighting, carpeting, things like that. Those are all non-structural components. Appliances, those are all super beneficial. You have dental office, right? Like you have all like the chairs and the equipment there and all the cabinetry. So the more complex the property is, the more components we can pull out of it and allocate towards an accelerated life.
That's super helpful. Thank you. So, when does it not make sense? Like, I'm just guessing, $100,000 house is it's not going to be cost effective, or maybe it is. How much does it cost to do the cost seg, and when does it become, just sort of like doesn't make sense?
Yeah, so I would say one of the things that I pride our firm on is we focus only on detailed engineering work, right? And so that means when you get to small residential, you typically have one of the following options. You do a DIY study. So like, hey, I'm going to pretend to be the engineer, fill out all this information, and hopefully do it in a way that's compliant with the IRS. Two is like, I'm going to take a modeling approach, and right, this firm's going to say like, oh, it's reviewed by an engineer, or they're going to, but it's really statistical analysis. They say, hey, we've done a lot of these. This is like another sample. We're just going to take these percentages from the average that we have and slap it onto your property, and then give you a report, and they're able to turn it around really quickly. Again, it's not really done in a high quality way. We just do detailed engineering work. So that means like we're actually going to look at your specific property and break down the components in your specific property. I like that approach because it's not just like one is actually done by an engineer. It is a little bit more expensive than those other models, but I pride us on being able to do these studies at a very affordable price point. So like, and still detailed engineering. Now we do that. Some of the ways we're able to do that is like, the big one is we're not going to physically go on site for a small residential property. So we're going to do a virtual site visit, meaning, hey, like we're going to set up a Zoom or a Google Meet, and we're going to go through the property, record it, see what's inside of it. And generally speaking, that makes sense for us if the property basis is under $1 million. So that means, yeah, we're going to do it virtually, right? And then either you or your property manager or somebody on site have to like walk us through the property and show us everything, right? We're going to take notes and just try to make sure we pull out everything possible. Once we're over $1 million, like, we typically go on site, right? Like we're going to go on site, take photographs and the whole 9 yards. But I'd say as long as you have a depreciable basis of 6 figures, like we're going to be able to do it, right? And our average price point on like short-term rentals, under $1 million is probably about $1,500 for the detailed engineering studies, which is a very competitive price point.
Okay, awesome. But as far as like, when does it not make sense to do it?
We can always turn around and estimate, but like if you were in 2024, let's just say 2025, right? The big beautiful bill, the bonus depreciation goes in January 20th, 2025. So if you were January 1st through January 19th, you're at 40% bonus depreciation. The smaller, you have to look at it from a return. I look at it from a return on investment standpoint. So like, okay, how much is the study? Is it $1,000? Is it $1,500? Like how much benefit am I getting? Am I going to get a return on that, right? Like if you are getting a return on your money, well, then your money's well invested. Now, once you start getting down under $100,000, like the benefits are going to be they're going to be very, very minimal. we have done studies down at that price point of like $1,000 for very, very small properties, right? And like those do make sense. But if you give us the property information, we're going to be able to give you an estimate and say like, hey, this is how much depreciation you get. This is the return on the money you get. And the other thing is you have to look at your tax rate, right? Because if your tax rate is super low, well, then the benefits go down too. So it's really like a custom thing. But generally speaking, the lower your depreciable basis, that makes it less attractive. The lower bonus depreciation is, that makes it less attractive. And the lower your tax rate is, that makes it less attractive.
Okay, well, man, I could talk to you about this forever, and it's just super fascinating stuff. But we'll just have to have you back to answer more questions from our audience, because I know we'll get some.
Cool. Thanks, Kathy. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Sean, thank you so much for joining me here on The Real Wealth Show.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me here on The Real Wealth Show. If you would like a referral to CPAs who specialize in tax benefits for real estate investors, specifically cost seg, just go to our website, realwealthshow.com. And when you're there, be sure to join. It's free, and you'll be able to speak with one of our investment counselors who can point you in the right direction. I'm Kathy Fettke. Thanks so much for joining me here on The Real Wealth Show, and we'll see you next time.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell any securities or to make or consider any investment or course of action. For more information, go to realwealthshow.com.